Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about this novel called When We Were Orphans by Kazuo Ishiguro. There's a lot of moving back and forth in this novel between time periods. So just to summarize the plot quickly, it's about a guy called Christopher Banks, who is the point of view character, and he talks about life in the Shanghai International Settlement in the early 1900s. He talks about his mother going missing and his quest to find her in later years, and his admirable, in his view, detective enthusiasm. Christopher talks a lot about Akira, who was a Japanese neighbor of his, who he was very friendly with. They stole things together and acted out plays together in the Shanghai International Settlement, and he was scared of getting taken back to Japan because he preferred it. His mother is a campaigner against the opium trade because she sees the way that the British brought opium into China from India and created the drug problem in China. She saw this as un-Christian and un-British. When Christopher looked into the opium trade, researched into the opium trade, he couldn't find any record of his mother's name, though he could find record of his Uncle Philip's name. Christopher thinks back to the time when his father never came back from work. This novel inserts fragments from different times into the narrative. Christopher reports how he was taken by his Uncle Philip to a crowded area once a Chinese man came to see his mother. He reports that he never understood the significance of this at the time. Christopher talks about the way he recently inherited a lot of money, so he adopts a daughter called Jennifer. Throughout this narrative, it's clear that Christopher is the kind of guy who wants to pretend consciously or unconsciously that the British didn't do any atrocities throughout their history, when the truth is they did. The Opium Wars are a good example of something the British did wrong. So when a character talks to Christopher about the origins of the war, Christopher is clearly uncomfortable. Throughout this narrative, Christopher often mentions Sarah Hemings. When Sarah says she's gone off to Shanghai, Christopher says that he's always meant to go out there to find out what happened to his parents. At one point, Sarah asks Christopher if he will go with her to Macau, which is just near Hong Kong. They have a brief romance, but it's clearly understated by the writer, which I don't find to be very realistic. After doing some detective work, Christopher finds that his parents were last seen, evidently, in some houses just outside the settlement. So he gets a driver to take him there, but the driver warns Christopher that they mustn't go too near the Japanese fighting area. Christopher ignores the driver, so the driver walks off. Eventually, the driver takes Christopher to a police station so that Christopher can continue his research. At the police station, Christopher asks for a guide to help him find the house where he believes his parents are located. Christopher is clearly an unreliable narrator because, of course, his parents wouldn't just be there after 20 years. A lieutenant helps Christopher to a certain extent, but soon Christopher is on his own. He enters some houses and eventually finds a Japanese guy who he thinks is Akira, although as readers we think that Christopher is deluded in this belief. Christopher fails to find his parents. He continues his detective work and eventually speaks to his uncle Philip. Uncle Philip tells him that his father is dead and that before he ran off with his mistress. He says how Christopher's mother was determined to stop opium coming to China, which of course is a factor that Christopher was thinking about earlier on during his detective journey. Philip explains how Christopher's mother and him himself became friendly with the warlords that the British sold the opium to, hence managed to prevent the British profiting from the opium trade. He explains that one day a warlord called Wang Ku was disrespected by Christopher's mother, so the warlord took Christopher's mother to be a concubine, and that is why she went missing. He explains that that is why he took Christopher to the crowded market all those years ago, because he wanted to keep Christopher away from this dangerous man. Philip explains that his mother made an arrangement so that Christopher's education and so forth would be funded by Wang Ku. Towards the end of the novel, we learn that opium addictions reduced significantly under communism. Before the end of the novel, Christopher meets his mother, who is in a nursing home in Hong Kong, and he knows that she still adores him after that. It's a very well concluded novel. All the pieces come together in my view. There are some very, very good sentences I find in this novel. Ishiguro has a very good way with words. He uses a lot of strong nouns and verbs. In other words, specific nouns and verbs. Some people might think there is too much moving back and forth in time in this book. I don't really think so. I think it's a great read, but not brilliant. I'd give it 3.5 stars out of 5. Kazuo Ishiguro went to the University of East Anglia, which is famous for its creative writing course. So you feel like you know this novel was researched very well, which is great. I particularly like the way that he gradually pieces together what's happening. I think it works. Thanks for watching. See you next time.